I remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong. It wasn't during the shouting match at the dinner table or when my brother Mark slammed his fist on the counter. It was the silence. The kind of silence that settles into a house like dust after a bomb goes off. My parents, Richard and Patricia, sat across from me in our living room in Phoenix, their faces carved from stone. My sister Sarah was curled in the corner of the couch, scrolling through her phone, pretending she wasn't part of this. Mark stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. "We've made our decision," my father said. His voice was flat, like he was reading a weather report. "The house is being sold. The money will be split between Mark and Sarah." I blinked. "And me?" My mother adjusted her glasses. She didn't look at me. "You've been living in Los Angeles for 7 years, Maya. You have your own life, your own career. You don't need this." "Need what?" I asked. "My inheritance? My share of the family home?" Mark snorted. "You mean the home you barely visited? The one you left us to deal with while you chased your dreams in Hollywood?" My stomach turned. I was a screenwriter, yes, but I wasn't chasing anything. I was working 60-hour weeks, barely making rent, surviving on coffee and hope. Still, I had never asked for help. I had never once asked them for money. "That house was Grandma's," I said quietly. "She left it to all 3 of us, equally." My father stood up. "Your grandmother left it to the family, and the family has decided." I looked at Sarah. She finally glanced up from her phone, but her eyes were cold. "You're not here, Maya. You never are. You missed every holiday last year. You missed Dad's birthday. You missed Mom's surgery." "I had a deadline," I said, my voice cracking. "I told you. I was writing a pilot that could change everything." "Nothing ever changes with you," Mark said. I felt the air leave my lungs. This wasn't about the house. This was about something older, something buried deep in the cracks of our family history. I had always been the odd one out, the dreamer, the one who left, but I had also been the one who held us together after Grandma died. I had driven home every weekend for 3 months, cleaning out her apartment, sorting her things, while Mark and Sarah argued over who got her china set. Now they were erasing me. "I'll fight this," I said. My mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were tired. "You can try, but we've already talked to a lawyer. The will is being executed as we speak." I left that night. I drove back to LA in a fog, my hands shaking on the wheel. I kept replaying the conversation, searching for the moment I had lost them, but I couldn't find it. Maybe it had been happening for years, slow and silent, like water wearing down a stone. When I got to my apartment, I sat on the floor of my tiny living room and stared at the wall. I had nothing, no family, no home, just a laptop and a half-finished script about a woman who loses everything and finds herself. I laughed. It was bitter and hollow. The next morning, I called a lawyer, not the family lawyer, someone new, someone who specialized in estate disputes. Her name was Elena Reeves, and she had a reputation for being ruthless. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. I told her about Grandma's will, the handwritten one she had shown me before she died. It was specific, equal shares, no exceptions. I told her about my parents' sudden decision to sell the house without my consent. I told her about Mark and Sarah, how they had always been the favorites, how my parents had always made excuses for them. Elena listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "There's something you need to know," she said finally. "Your grandmother's will was filed with the county, but there's a second document, a codicil. It was never read in probate." My heart stopped. "What does it say?" "I can't tell you yet, but it changes everything." I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Grandma. She was the only one who ever believed in me. She used to sit with me in her garden, telling me stories about her own mother, a woman who had been disowned by her family for marrying the wrong man. "Blood doesn't mean loyalty," she told me once. "It means nothing if they don't show up for you." I thought she was just being dramatic. Now I understood. The next week, I flew back to Phoenix. I didn't tell anyone. I went straight to the county courthouse and requested the full probate file. The clerk handed me a thick folder. I sat in the corner of the lobby and opened it. There it was, the codicil. dated 3 months before Grandma died, in her own handwriting. It said that if any of her grandchildren attempted to exclude another from the inheritance, that grandchild would forfeit their entire share, and the share would be redistributed to the excluded grandchild. My hands were shaking. This was it. This was the weapon I needed. But then I saw the date on the filing stamp. It was dated 6 months after Grandma's death. Someone had hidden it. Someone had deliberately kept it from the probate court. I looked up. The clerk was watching me. "Who filed this?" I asked. She checked her computer. "A woman named Patricia Miller, your mother." The room spun. My own mother had hidden the codicil. She had known about it. She had chosen to bury it. I walked out of the courthouse into the blinding Arizona sun. I felt like I was floating. Everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. They hadn't just excluded me. They had conspired to steal from me. I called Elena. "They're going to lose everything," I said. "I know," she said, "but you have to be ready. This isn't just a legal battle. It's a war, and wars leave scars." I looked at the courthouse behind me. I thought about Grandma's garden, the smell of roses, the sound of her voice. "I'm ready," I said, but I wasn't. Not really. Because the next morning I got a text from Sarah. It was a photo of my grandmother's will with a note written in the margin, in my mother's handwriting. It said, "Destroy this." I stood in the hallway of my parents' house, the cold tile seeping through my thin socks. The house smelled the same, lemon polish and my mother's lavender sachets. But everything felt different. My mother's hand was still on my arm, her grip gentle but insistent. She guided me into the living room where my father sat in his leather recliner, the same one he'd occupied for 30 years. He didn't stand up. "Sit down, Claire," he said, his voice flat. Not a question, a command. I sat on the edge of the couch, my purse still clutched in my lap. My mother lowered herself beside me, her eyes darting between me and my father. The air in the room was thick, heavy with words that hadn't been spoken. "We need to talk about the house," my father said. He picked up a newspaper from the side table, folded it, and set it down again, a nervous habit I'd never seen him have. "What about the house?" I asked. My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Your brother is moving back," my mother said softly. "He and Linda need a place to stay, just temporarily." I blinked. "Mark is moving back? Here?" "The market's tough," my father said, as if that explained everything. "He lost his job. They're selling their condo. They need a fresh start." A fresh start. The words echoed in my head. Mark had always needed fresh starts. Every few years, there was a new crisis, a new job, a new city, and every time, my parents were there to catch him. I'd never asked for a fresh start. I just kept going. "So, where are you going to live?" I asked. The question came out before I could stop it. My mother's face went pale. "Claire, we thought you could help." "Help how?" "We need to sell this house," my father said. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "The market's good right now. We can get top dollar, but we need to move quickly. Your mother and I are going to downsize, get a small apartment, but we need somewhere to stay while we look." I felt the room tilt. "You want to move in with me?" "Just for a few months," my mother said. Her hand found mine, squeezed it. "We know it's a lot to ask, but you have that big house and it's just you and the kids. We wouldn't be in the way." The big house. The house I'd bought with my own money after years of saving and scrimping. The house where I'd raised my daughters alone, where I'd painted every room myself, where I'd planted the garden with my own hands. The house that was mine. "I don't know," I said. "I need to think about it." My father's jaw tightened. "There's not much time to think. We need to put the house on the market by next month." "Next month?" I stood up, my legs shaky. "You're asking me to upend my life in a month?" "We're not asking you to upend anything," my mother said. "We're just asking for a little help. Family helps family." Family helps family. Those words had been the soundtrack of my life. Every time I'd given up a weekend to help my mother clean her house, every time I'd loaned Mark money I never saw again, every time I'd swallowed my own needs to keep the peace. Family helps family. I'll let you know, I said. I walked to the door, my feet moving before my brain could catch up. I didn't say goodbye. The drive home was a blur. I pulled into my driveway, sat in the car for a long moment staring at the house. The lights were on in the living room. Sarah was home from school. I could see her silhouette through the curtain moving to the kitchen. My daughter, my home. I walked inside and found her at the counter eating a bowl of cereal. She looked up at me, her eyes curious. "You okay, Mom?" "Yeah," I said, "just tired." She didn't push. She never did. She was 16, but she had the instincts of someone much older. She knew when to leave me alone. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking. The conversation replayed in my head. My parents wanted to sell their house. They wanted to move in with me. And Mark was coming back. Mark, my older brother, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who'd never had to struggle because my parents were always there to smooth the path. I'd watched him get a car at 16 while I worked summer jobs to buy my own. I'd watched him get a free ride through college while I took out loans. I'd watched him get a down payment on his first house while I rented a studio apartment, and now he was coming back. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. It rang 5 times before he answered. "Hey, Claire." His voice was casual, like we talked every day. "Mark, what's going on?" I asked. "Mom and Dad just told me you're moving back." He sighed. "Yeah, it's been rough. Linda lost her job too, and we just couldn't keep up with the mortgage. We're going to stay with Mom and Dad for a while, get back on our feet. They're selling the house." "I know. They told me. It's the right move. The market's good. And they want to move in with me." There was a pause. "Look, Claire, I know it's a lot, but they're our parents. We have to take care of them." "I've been taking care of them," I said, my voice rising. "I've been the one who drives them to doctor's appointments, who helps them with their taxes, who drops off groceries. Where have you been?" "I've been busy," he said. "I have my own family to worry about." "And I don't?" The silence stretched between us. I could hear him breathing. "I'm not going to fight with you," he said finally. "This is hard enough. Just do what you have to do." He hung up. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding. Do what you have to do. As if I hadn't been doing that my whole life. As if I hadn't been the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who always said yes. I walked to my closet and pulled out a box I kept on the top shelf. Inside were old letters, photographs, a few keepsakes. But what I was looking for was at the bottom, a folder of documents I'd kept for years. Tax returns, loan statements, bank records, evidence of every time I'd helped my family, every time I'd given them money, every time I'd sacrificed. I spread them out on the bed. The numbers were staggering. Over the past 10 years, I'd given my parents nearly $40,000. Loans for Mark that were never repaid. Money for my mother's medical bills. Help with the house repairs. And not once had anyone said thank you. I thought about the house I'd built for myself, the life I'd created. I thought about my daughters, about the future I was trying to secure for them. And I thought about my parents, about Mark, about the endless cycle of giving and taking. I wasn't going to let them take my home. I picked up my phone and called my mother. "Claire, are you okay?" she asked. "I've been thinking," I said, "about your offer." "Yes? I'll let you stay with me. But there are conditions." Her voice brightened. "Of course, sweetheart, anything. I need to see the paperwork on the house sale. I need to know how much you're getting and where that money is going. And I need Mark to sign a repayment plan for the money he owes me." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Claire, that's not necessary," she said, her voice tight. "It is necessary," I said. "I've been keeping track for years, and I'm done being the one who gives without getting anything back. We're your parents. And I'm your daughter. But that doesn't mean I have to be your doormat." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but my heart was steady. For the first time in my life, I was standing my ground, and I had no idea what would happen next. I stood in my mother's kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd learned to bake cookies with Grandma Rose, and watched my sister Sarah arrange a platter of store-bought pastries. The morning light streamed through the window, catching the dust motes floating in the air. My hands were still shaking from last night's confrontation, but I'd promised myself I wouldn't cry today. "You look tired," Sarah said without looking up. She smoothed her blouse, a designer piece I recognized from a magazine spread. "Mom said you were up late." "I was going through some old boxes in the attic." Her hands paused for a fraction of a second. "Find anything interesting?" I watched her face carefully. "Just memories, old photos, Dad's journals." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Those should have been thrown out years ago." "Why? Because they tell the truth?" She finally looked at me, her eyes cold and flat. "The truth about what, Emma? That Dad was a dreamer who never made enough money? We all know that story." I wanted to scream. Instead, I picked up a pastry and bit into it, the flaky crust crumbling in my mouth. "Speaking of money," I said slowly, "I was thinking about that loan you gave me 5 years ago, the one you said was from your savings." Sarah's face went pale. "What about it?" "I just wondered why the bank statement I found in Dad's desk showed a withdrawal of exactly $50,000 on the same day you handed me that check." The kitchen fell silent. Even the humming refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. "You're mistaken," Sarah said, but her voice cracked. "Am I? Because I also found the deposit slip from your account into Mom's account with a note that said, 'For Emma's emergency fund.'" Sarah's hands were trembling now. She set down the pastry she'd been holding. "That money was from Mom and Dad. They asked me to handle the transfer." "Then why did Dad write in his journal that he was worried about you taking money from their retirement account?" The front door opened, and my mother walked in, her arms full of grocery bags. She looked between us, sensing the tension. "Girls, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Mom," Sarah said quickly. "Emma was just leaving." "No, I wasn't." I turned to my mother. "Mom, do you remember when you and Dad helped me buy my house?" Mom set down the bags slowly. "Of course, sweetheart, we were happy to help." "And where did that money come from?" She looked confused. "From our savings. Your father always made sure we had a nest egg. But Dad's journal says you were struggling with debt, that you were behind on the mortgage." Sarah stepped forward. "Emma, stop this. You're upsetting Mom." "I'm upsetting her? Or am I upsetting you?" Mom sank into a chair. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photo I'd taken of Dad's journal entry. Dad wrote that Sarah took $50,000 from their retirement account without telling anyone. She used it to pay off her own credit card debt. Then she covered it up by saying it was a gift to me. Sarah's face contorted. "That's a lie. Dad was confused. He had dementia, remember?" "The journal is dated 3 years before his diagnosis." Mom picked up my phone, her hands shaking as she read the screen. Her eyes filled with tears. "Sarah? Is this true?" "Mom, don't listen to her. She's jealous. She's always been jealous of my success." "Success?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the success you built on Mom and Dad's retirement? The same retirement that's now empty?" Mom looked up at Sarah. "Where is our money, Sarah?" Sarah's composure shattered. I needed it. David was going to leave me. The credit card companies were calling every day. I couldn't lose my house. I couldn't lose my marriage. "So you stole from our parents?" I said. "I was going to pay it back. I always planned to pay it back." "With what? Your husband's salary? The one he lost 6 months ago?" Mom stood up, her face pale. "David lost his job?" Sarah started crying, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "It was temporary. He's starting a new company. We'll have the money soon." "When, Sarah?" I pressed. "When exactly? Because I found the second mortgage on your house. I found the foreclosure notice." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Foreclosure?" "She's been hiding everything," I said. "The debts, the lies. She's been living on borrowed time and borrowed money, and she's been using Mom and Dad's savings to do it." Sarah's tears turned to anger. "You think you're so perfect? You with your little house and your safe job? You don't know what it's like to have people depending on you." "People depending on me?" I'm the one who's been paying Mom's property taxes for the last 2 years. I'm the one who's been covering her insurance. Where were you? I was trying to keep my family together. By tearing ours apart? Mom sat down again, her head in her hands. I don't understand. Your father and I worked so hard. We saved everything. We wanted to leave something for you girls. And she took it, I said. All of it. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. It wasn't all of it. There's still the house. I stared at her. The house? Mom signed it over to me last year. She said it was to avoid probate. Mom looked up, confused. I signed the house over. I don't remember that. You were having a bad day, Mom. You signed the papers I brought. I told you it was for the trust. The room spun around me. You tricked her into signing over the house? I was protecting it. If she went into a nursing home, the state would take everything. This way, it stays in the family. In your family, you mean? In my name, yes, but I would never sell it. Mom can live here as long as she wants. I felt sick. And what happens when the bank forecloses on your house? When they come after your assets? They'll take this house too. Sarah's face went white. They can't. It's in my name now. They can if you used it as collateral. Did you? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence said everything. Mom started crying soft, broken sounds that cut through me. My house. Your father built that house with his own hands. He wanted us to always have a home. I knelt beside her, taking her hand. Mom, I'm going to fix this, I promise. How? Sarah spat. You don't have that kind of money. No, but I have something better. I have the truth. I stood up and walked to the hallway closet. Inside, behind a stack of old coats, was a safe I'd found last night. I'd spent hours trying to crack the combination, and finally, I'd remembered. Dad's birthday. The same code he used for everything. I spun the dial. Left, right, left. The lock clicked open. Inside, there was a stack of papers, bank statements, deeds, and a single envelope with my name on it. I brought the envelope back to the kitchen. Sarah watched me, her eyes wide with fear. What's that? I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter written in my father's shaky handwriting. Dear Emma, I read aloud, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was alive. Sarah has been taking money from us for years. I tried to stop her, but your mother didn't want to believe it. I set up a separate account, a secret one, with the last of our savings. It's not much, but it's yours. Use it to protect your mother, and please forgive me for not being stronger. Sarah grabbed for the letter, but I pulled it away. Give me that. No. My voice was steel. This is mine. This is Dad's last gift to me. That money belongs to the family. The family you've been stealing from? Mom stood up, her face suddenly hard. Sarah, I want you to leave. Mom, please, leave. Now. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, then grabbed her purse and walked out. The door slammed behind her. Mom turned to me, tears streaming down her face. What do we do now? I looked at the letter in my hands, at my father's final words. We fight. We fight for everything he left us, and we make sure Sarah never takes another thing from this family again. But even as I said it, I knew the fight was just beginning. Sarah wouldn't give up easily. She had too much to lose, and I had just declared war on my own sister. The private investigator's office smelled like stale coffee and old paper. I sat across from a man named Frank, who had the tired eyes of someone who had seen every kind of family secret. My hands were shaking as I slid the USB drive across his desk. I need you to find out who my sister really is, I said. Frank plugged it in, scrolling through the scanned documents I had stolen from my parents' safe. His eyebrows rose. You sure you want this, kid? Once you know, you can't unknow. I'm sure. He printed out a single page, a birth certificate, but not mine. This one was for a baby girl named Emily Rose, born on the same day as me in the same hospital. The mother's name was blank. The father's name was blank. I stared at it, my breath catching. Who is this? Frank leaned back. That's what we're going to find out. I walked out of his office into the cold afternoon air, my mind racing. I had always felt like a shadow in my own family, but this was different. This was proof that something was deeply wrong. I called my brother Mark, the one sibling I still trusted. He answered on the first ring. "I need to see you," I said, alone. We met at a diner near his apartment. The place was nearly empty, just an old man reading a newspaper at the counter. Mark slid into the booth across from me, his face worried. "You look terrible. What's going on?" I pushed the birth certificate across the table. He picked it up, his eyes scanning the page. His face went pale. "Where did you get this?" "From Dad's safe." He set it down slowly, rubbing his temples. "You shouldn't have done that." "Why not? Because it's the truth?" "Mark, who is Emily Rose?" He looked out the window, his jaw tight. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he said, "I don't know, but I remember something. When I was about 10, I overheard Mom and Dad arguing. Mom was crying. She said, 'You can't just pretend she doesn't exist.' Dad said, 'We have to, for the family.'" My heart pounded. Pretend who doesn't exist, Emily? I don't know. I was a kid. I forgot about it until now. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. There's more. I found a letter. It mentioned a lawsuit, something about a settlement. Mark's eyes widened. "A lawsuit? Against who?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." We sat in silence for a while. The waitress came by, but we didn't order. Finally, Mark said, "Be careful. This family has secrets for a reason. That's exactly why I'm doing this." I went home that night, but I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the birth certificate, trying to imagine the girl who shared my birthday. Was she out there somewhere? Did she know about me? I pulled out my laptop and started searching. Hospital records, maternity wards. Nothing came up. It was like Emily Rose had never existed. The next morning, Frank called. "I found something. You need to come down here." I drove to his office, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. When I walked in, he had a stack of papers spread across his desk. "There's a sealed court case from 25 years ago," he said. "A wrongful death lawsuit filed by a woman named Margaret Rose." My breath caught. Rose. Like Emily Rose. Exactly. The case was against a private adoption agency, but it was settled out of court. Terms are confidential. I sat down, my legs weak. What does that have to do with my family? Frank slid a photo across the desk. It was a woman, young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair and sad eyes. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "That's Margaret Rose. She's your mother's younger sister." I stared at the photo. My aunt. I had an aunt I never knew about. Why did she sue an adoption agency? Because she gave up a baby for adoption, and then the baby died. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk. "The baby was Emily Rose?" Frank nodded slowly. "That's what the lawsuit was about, negligence. The agency lost her medical records. She died of a preventable infection." I felt tears burning in my eyes. "So my sister, she was adopted? And she died?" "That's what the records say. But here's the strange part. The adoption was arranged by your father. He was a lawyer for the agency." I couldn't breathe. My father, the man who had built a fortune on family values, had been involved in a cover-up that led to a baby's death, and my mother's sister had been the one to pay the price. "There's more," Frank said. "Margaret Rose disappeared after the settlement. No one knows where she went, but I found a connection to your family's charity foundation. Money was transferred from the foundation to an anonymous account every year for the past 25 years. Blackmail, I whispered. Or hush money, someone was being paid to stay quiet. I looked at the photo of my aunt again. She had my mother's eyes, my mother's silence. I thought about all the times I had asked about my family history and my mother had changed the subject. I thought about the way my father looked at me sometimes, like I was a reminder of something he wanted to forget. I stood up, my legs shaky. "I need to find her. Margaret Rose." Frank handed me a file. "Last known address is in Oregon, but that was 15 years ago. She might not be there." "It's a start." I walked out into the daylight, but the world felt darker now. I had a sister I never knew, a baby who died because of my family's greed, and somewhere out there, a woman was carrying the weight of that loss, alone. I got into my car and pulled out my phone. I called my mother. She answered, her voice guarded. "What is it, honey?" "I know about Emily Rose." There was a long silence, then a sound I had never heard before. My mother was crying. "Where are you?" she whispered. "I'm coming home, and you're going to tell me everything." I hung up before she could answer. The engine roared to life, and I drove toward the house that had never felt like home. But this time, I wasn't coming back as a daughter. I was coming back as a detective, a judge, and the only person who could give Emily Rose a voice. The waiting was the worst part. 3 days since I'd sent the letters. 3 days of pretending everything was normal while my insides churned like a storm. I sat in my home office, the morning light filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. My hands were steady, but my heart was a wild thing, pounding against my ribs. I had no idea what was coming next. That was the point. I had lit the fuse. Now I just had to wait for the explosion. Mom called me at noon. Her voice was thin, brittle. "Clara, honey, I got something in the mail today. From you. It's a lot." I took a slow breath. "Read it, Mom. Take your time." She was silent for a long moment. I could hear her shuffling papers, the crinkle of the envelope. "It says, you're not my daughter, that there was a switch at the hospital." Her voice cracked. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke, Mom. It's the truth. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I only found out a few months ago." "But how? Why now?" She was crying. I could hear it in her voice, the raw, ragged edge of a woman whose world had just tilted off its axis. "I have proof, Mom. DNA tests, medical records. I'll explain everything. But first, I need you to know that I love you. You're my mother. Nothing changes that." She didn't answer, just a muffled sob, then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand. That was the hardest call I'd ever made, but it wasn't the last. Ethan called an hour later. His voice was ice. "What the hell is this, Clara? You're sending letters? To everyone? Are you out of your mind?" "I'm telling the truth, Ethan. The same truth you've been hiding for 20 years. You don't know what you're talking about." "I know everything. The switch, the money, the lies. I have the documents. I have the DNA. I have the emails from your father's old lawyer." Silence. Then a low, dangerous laugh. "You think you're so smart, but you're just a pawn. You have no idea what you've stepped into." "I'm not stepping into anything, Ethan. I'm already here, and I'm not going anywhere." He hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt a strange calm settle over me. The first move was made. The board was set. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Voicemails from old family friends. A reporter from the local paper had somehow gotten wind of the story. I ignored them all. I had one target, and it wasn't the gossip mill. I drove to my grandmother's house, the old Victorian on Maple Street where I'd spent so many summers as a child. She was the matriarch, the keeper of secrets. If anyone knew the truth, it was her. She met me at the door. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked smaller than I remembered, fragile in a way I'd never noticed before. "You shouldn't have done that, Clara," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I had to, Grandma. You know I had to." She led me into the living room, the same floral wallpaper, the same ticking clock on the mantel. She sat down heavily in her armchair, her hands clasped in her lap. "Your mother called me," she said. "She was hysterical. She doesn't deserve this. She doesn't deserve the lies either. You all kept this from her, from me, for 20 years. My grandmother looked at me, her eyes wet. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. A mistake that paid for Ethan's college, a mistake that bought him a car, a house, a business, while I got nothing, while I grew up thinking I was part of a family that was never really mine." She flinched. "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like. Tell me the truth." She was quiet for a long time. The clock ticked. The house creaked. Finally, she spoke. Your father, my son, he was desperate. He owed money, bad people. He thought he could fix it. When the switch happened, he saw an opportunity. He took it. He took money from a grieving family. He took money from people who had too much. The other family, the DeMarcos, they were rich. They didn't need another child. They had everything. Your father thought it was a kind of justice. Justice? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. He stole a child. He stole my life. And you all let him. My grandmother reached for my hand. I pulled away. I'm not here for forgiveness, Grandma. I'm here to tell you that I'm going to finish this. I'm going to make it right. What does that mean? It means the truth comes out. All of it. The switch, the money, the cover-up. Everyone will know. She closed her eyes. You'll destroy this family. This family destroyed itself. I'm just holding up the mirror. I left her sitting there, alone in that big old house. I didn't look back. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the old warehouse on River Road. Midnight. Come alone. Bring the documents. My heart raced. This was it. The trap was set and someone was walking into it. I knew it could be a setup, but I also knew I had to go. I packed the folder with copies of everything. The DNA results, the hospital records, the emails, the financial statements. I put it in my bag and drove to the warehouse. It was an abandoned building on the edge of town, dark and cold. The only light came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. I waited in the shadows, my breath fogging in the chill air. At midnight, a car pulled up. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a figure stepping out. It was Ethan's father, my uncle, the man who had helped orchestrate it all. He looked older than I remembered, his face lined with worry. You came, he said, his voice flat. You asked. He walked toward me, stopping a few feet away. You have no idea what you're doing. This isn't a game, Clara. I'm not playing games. I'm exposing the truth. He shook his head. The truth will destroy everyone. Your mother, your grandmother, the DeMarcos, even you. I'll take that risk. He reached into his jacket. My heart jumped, but he pulled out a checkbook. I'll give you $500,000. Right now, cash. You walk away. You destroy the documents. You disappear. I stared at him. You think you can buy me off? Everyone has a price. Not me. He sighed, a long, weary sound. Then you leave me no choice. He pulled out his phone and made a call. 2 men emerged from the shadows behind me. I hadn't seen them. I hadn't heard them. They grabbed my arms, pinning them behind my back. Take the bag, my uncle said. One of them ripped my bag from my shoulder. He pulled out the folder, flipped through it, and handed it to my uncle. Burn it, my uncle said. The man took out a lighter. I watched as my evidence, my months of work, turned to ash in a metal drum. The flames danced, consuming everything. My uncle looked at me, his eyes cold. This is your only warning. Next time, I won't be so kind. He turned and walked away. The men let go of me, shoving me to the ground. I lay there, the gravel biting into my palms, the smell of smoke filling my lungs. They drove off. The warehouse was dark again. I was alone. But I wasn't beaten, because they didn't know about the copies. They didn't know about the backup drive hidden in my apartment. They didn't know that I had already sent a full set of documents to a lawyer with instructions to release them if anything happened to me. They thought they had won, but they had only made me more determined. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. And the next move was mine. The morning of the reading, I woke up in my childhood bedroom, the same pale pink walls that had witnessed every tear I'd ever shed. My mother's perfume still clung to the curtains. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the way she'd looked at me in the hospital, so proud, so sure I'd be okay. I'd failed her. I'd failed myself. I pulled on the only black dress I owned, a simple thing I'd bought for a funeral I never thought I'd attend. The drive to the lawyer's office was a blur of gray clouds and wet streets. The sky was crying for me. I parked my beat-up Honda next to a row of luxury SUVs. My brother's Audi was there, spotless and gleaming. I sat in the car for a long minute, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I could do this. I had to do this. The office was modern, all glass and chrome, with a receptionist who barely looked up when I walked in. She pointed to a conference room at the end of the hall. The door was half open. I heard laughter. My brother's laugh, the one he used when he was winning. I pushed the door open. The room fell silent. My brother sat at the head of the table, his wife beside him, her fingers wrapped around his arm like a leash. They both looked at me with that practiced pity, the kind that said, "We knew you'd come crawling back." I took a seat across from them, as far away as possible. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. This is the reading of Evelyn Holloway's last will and testament." He opened a folder. My heart hammered. My brother leaned forward, a smirk playing on his lips. I knew what he expected. A few sentimental items, maybe a small sum of money, and then the grand reveal of his inheritance. I'd already accepted it. I'd spent the last week convincing myself I didn't need the money, that I could build my own life. I'd almost believed it. Mr. Harrison began reading. "To my son, Marcus, I leave my antique pocket watch, a family heirloom passed down for 3 generations." Marcus nodded, satisfied. The pocket watch was nice, but it was a token. The real prize was coming. "To my daughter-in-law, Patricia, I leave my collection of vintage brooches." Patricia smiled, her eyes already scanning the room as if calculating the value of everything else. "To my granddaughter, Lily, I leave my complete set of first edition Jane Austen novels." I waited. My name. I knew it would come last, the small, forgotten part. Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses. "To my daughter, Clara, I leave the house at 1420 Maple Street, including all its contents, and the sum of $1 million. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. I blinked. My brother's chair scraped back. "What?" His voice was sharp, disbelieving. "That's not possible." Mr. Harrison continued, unfazed. "Additionally, I leave to Clara the controlling shares of Holloway Construction, effective immediately." I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. My brother stood up, his face reddening. "That's a mistake. She's not capable. She's a nobody." Patricia grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. "Marcus, sit down." He didn't. He pointed at me. "She's been mooching off Mom for years. She's a failure. She doesn't deserve this." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I looked at the lawyer, waiting for him to say it was a joke, a clerical error, but he just slid a thick envelope across the table toward me. "There are additional documents, Clara. Your mother left you a letter." I took the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy, sealed with red wax, my mother's favorite color. I didn't open it. Not yet. I couldn't. Not in front of them. My brother slammed his hand on the table. "I'll contest this. She manipulated Mom. She took advantage of her illness." Mr. Harrison's voice was calm, almost bored. "The will was certified by 2 independent doctors. Mrs. Holloway was of sound mind when she signed it. There is no basis for a contest." Patricia's face twisted into something ugly. "You think you can just walk in here and take everything? You've never worked a day in your life." That snapped me out of my shock. I stood up, my legs shaking. "I worked every day for Mom. I was there when she couldn't eat, when she couldn't breathe, when she cried at night because she was scared. Where were you, sending flowers?" Marcus stepped toward me. "Don't you dare." "I'm not daring anything," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm stating a fact. You were too busy building your empire to visit her, and now you want her money? You don't get to have both." He opened his mouth. "But Mr." Harrison raised a hand. "The will is final. Any legal action will be met with a countersuit for legal fees. I suggest you accept the terms." Marcus stood there, his fists clenched, his face a mask of fury. Then he turned and walked out, Patricia scrambling after him. The door slammed, shaking the glass walls. I was alone with the lawyer and the envelope. I sank back into my chair, my hands still shaking. "I don't understand. Why would she do this?" "Mr." Harrison smiled, a rare, soft expression. She said you'd ask that. She wanted you to know that she saw you, all the sacrifices, the quiet nights, the things you never told anyone. She said you were the only one who truly loved her. Tears blurred my vision. I clutched the envelope to my chest. What do I do now? You go home, he said, and you read her letter. I drove home in a daze. The house looked the same, but it felt different now. It was mine. Every creaky floorboard, every chipped paint, every memory. I walked to my mother's room and sat on her bed. The envelope was warm in my hands. I broke the seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper covered in her familiar, shaky handwriting. My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, I'm gone, but I need you to know something. I didn't leave you the company because you were the easy choice. I left it to you because you were the only one who could save it. Marcus was bleeding it dry. He's been embezzling for years. The evidence is in the safety deposit box at First National. Use it wisely. I love you. I've always been proud of you. Now go show them who you really are. My hands went cold. Embezzling, my brother, the company, the millions. It all clicked into place. The anger in his eyes wasn't just greed. It was fear. He knew I'd find out. I looked out the window at the rain still falling. The world had changed in an hour. I wasn't the failure anymore. I was the one holding the truth, and I had no idea what to do with it. The courtroom hums with a low current of anticipation. I sit at the plaintiff's table, my hands wrapped around a cold water bottle, my knuckles white. Mom is next to me, her eyes fixed on the empty judge's bench. Her face is pale, but her jaw is set. She's been quiet all morning, and I know she's replaying every moment of the last 2 years, every lie, every stolen dollar. Dad walks in with his lawyer, a man named Harrington who wears a suit so sharp it could cut glass. Dad looks smaller than I remember. His shoulders are hunched, his hair thinner. He doesn't look at me. He stares straight ahead like he's walking through a fog. Aunt Karen is in the gallery, front row, her arms crossed. She's wearing a dark dress, no jewelry. She looks like a widow at a funeral. Judge Morrison enters. She's a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and eyes that have seen every kind of human failure. She settles into her chair, adjusts her glasses, and nods at the court clerk. We're here for the preliminary hearing in the matter of the estate of Eleanor Vance, she says. Her voice is calm, but it carries weight. Let's proceed. Harrington stands first. He clears his throat and launches into a speech about procedural irregularities, about how the evidence my lawyer, Sarah, presented is circumstantial at best. He talks about Dad's long history of managing the family finances, about how he was trusted by Grandma Eleanor. There is no proof of intentional fraud, Harrington says, his voice smooth as oil. My client acted in good faith, under the belief that he was executing the wishes of the deceased. Sarah rises. She's younger than Harrington, but she has a fire in her eyes I've never seen before. She walks to the center of the room, holding a single sheet of paper. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Vance systematically transferred funds from his mother's accounts into a private trust, one that he controlled exclusively. We have bank statements, wire transfer records, and a signed affidavit from a former bank employee who witnessed the transactions. Dad shifts in his seat. I see his hands grip the edge of the table. Harrington scoffs. That affidavit is hearsay. The employee was fired for misconduct. She has every reason to lie. Sarah doesn't flinch. She turns to me. Mr. Vance, would you please approach the bench? I stand. My legs feel like they're made of rubber. I walk to the witness stand, raise my right hand, and swear to tell the truth. The bailiff hands me a Bible. I don't need it. I've been telling the truth my whole life, and it's gotten me nowhere. Sarah hands me a folder. Can you identify this document? I open it. It's a letter, handwritten, in Grandma Eleanor's shaky script. The ink is faded, but the words are clear. I read it silently first, my heart pounding against my ribs. It's a letter from my grandmother, I say, my voice cracking, dated 2 weeks before she died. What does it say? Sarah asks. I read aloud. To my grandson, Michael, if you're reading this, I am gone. I know what your father is doing. He thinks I'm too old to notice, but I see everything. He's taking money from my accounts, putting it somewhere I can't reach. I've tried to stop him, but he threatens to put me in a home. Please, Michael, don't let him get away with it. Love, Grandma. The courtroom goes silent. I look up. Dad's face is white. His lawyer is staring at the letter like it's a snake. Harrington recovers quickly. Your Honor, this letter is not notarized. It's not a legal document. It has no evidentiary value. Judge Morrison holds up her hand. Let me see that. I hand the letter to the bailiff, who passes it to the judge. She reads it slowly, her expression unreadable. Then she looks at Dad. Mr. Vance, did you threaten to place your mother in a nursing home? Dad's mouth opens, but nothing comes out. He looks at Harrington, who nods slightly. No, Your Honor, Dad says. His voice is thin. She was confused. She had dementia. The medical records show no diagnosis of dementia, Sarah says. Her primary care physician testified that Mrs. Vance was lucid until her final week, the gallery murmurs. Aunt Karen is staring at Dad with pure hatred. Judge Morrison sets the letter down. I will allow the letter into evidence. We'll proceed to a full hearing in 6 weeks. Mr. Vance, you are ordered to provide all financial records related to the trust. Failure to comply will result in sanctions. Harrington stands again. Your Honor, my client has a heart condition. The stress of this litigation is endangering his health. Then perhaps he should have thought of that before he stole from his own mother, Judge Morrison says. Her voice is ice. Court is adjourned. The gavel falls. I don't move. I sit there, staring at the letter in my hands. Mom touches my shoulder. Michael, she whispers, you did good. But I don't feel good. I feel hollow. I look at Dad as he leaves the courtroom, his shoulders shaking. Aunt Karen follows him out, her heels clicking on the marble floor. I walk into the hallway. Dad is leaning against a wall, his face buried in his hands. Aunt Karen is standing a few feet away, her arms crossed. You always were a coward, Thomas, she says, but I never thought you'd steal from Mom. Dad looks up. His eyes are red. I didn't steal. I was protecting the family. Protecting? I step forward. You took everything. You left Mom with nothing. You left me with nothing. You don't understand, he says. The business was failing. I had to keep it afloat. Mom would have wanted that. Mom wanted you to be a good son, Aunt Karen snaps. She wanted you to be a good father. You failed at both. Dad pushes off the wall. He walks past me, his steps slow and heavy. I watch him disappear around the corner. I turn to Aunt Karen. Why didn't you tell me sooner? You knew what he was doing. She looks at the floor. I was scared. He's my brother. I thought I could fix it myself. I was wrong. I don't know what to say. I feel a cold knot in my chest. The hearing is over, but the real battle hasn't even started. 6 weeks. That's all I have to gather every piece of evidence, every scrap of proof. Mom takes my hand. We'll get through this, Michael. Together. I nod, but I'm not sure I believe her, because as I stand there in the empty hallway, I realize that this isn't just about money. It's about trust. It's about family. And I'm not sure either of those things can ever be repaired. The morning after the public humiliation, I sat in my car outside the courthouse, watching the sunrise paint the glass facade in shades of gold. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my stomach churned with a cocktail of exhaustion and anticipation. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Linda's face crumple, heard her desperate pleas, felt the weight of 25 years of lies crashing down. But this was not over. The evidence box sat on the passenger seat, still heavy with the folders I had not yet used. The real weapon was still hidden, waiting for the right moment. I took a deep breath and walked into the building. The hallways were quieter today, but the whispers followed me like a shadow. I could feel eyes on my back, hear the hushed tones. That's the daughter who ruined her mother. Did you hear what she did? I ignored them. I had learned to wear their judgment like armor. The courtroom was almost empty when I entered. My father was already there, sitting in the same seat as yesterday, his face pale and drawn. He looked older, smaller. He did not meet my eyes. Linda was not present yet. I took my place at the plaintiff's table, my lawyer beside me. his jaw tight. He had warned me that the judge might sanction me for the outburst, but I had calculated the risk. Sometimes the truth needs a shock to land. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Morrison entered, her expression unreadable. She settled into her chair and looked directly at me. "Ms. Chen, I will not tolerate another scene in my courtroom. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. She nodded, then turned to the clerk. "Call the next witness." The doors opened and Linda walked in. She was dressed in a dark blue suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless. She looked like a woman who had spent the night regrouping, crafting a new strategy. She did not look at me. She walked to the witness stand with the poise of a queen, her chin high. But I saw the slight tremor in her hand as she raised it to be sworn in. My lawyer stood. "Mrs. Chen, you testified yesterday that you had no knowledge of the trust fund your husband set up for his daughter. Is that correct?" Linda's eyes flickered to my father, then back. "Yes, that is correct. And you also testified that you believed the family assets were shared equally between you and your husband." "Yes." "Then can you explain this?" My lawyer slid a document across the table to the court clerk. The judge examined it, her eyebrows rising slightly. Linda's face remained calm, but I saw her swallow. "I don't know what that is." "It is a certified copy of a deed of trust, dated 3 years ago, transferring ownership of the family home on Maple Street solely to you, with no mention of your husband or his daughter. The signature at the bottom is yours." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Linda's smile tightened. "That is a private matter between my husband and me. He agreed to it." "Did he?" My lawyer turned to my father. "Mr. Chen, did you agree to transfer the family home to your wife alone, excluding your daughter from any inheritance?" My father hesitated. I could see the war in his eyes, the fear of Linda, the shame of his silence, the last shred of decency fighting to break free. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Linda shot him a look that could freeze fire. "Richard, don't—" "Objection, Your Honor," her lawyer interrupted, leading the witness. Judge Morrison held up a hand. "Overruled, Mr. Chen, answer the question." The silence stretched. I held my breath. My father looked at me, and for the first time in years I saw something other than guilt in his eyes. I saw regret. "No," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I did not agree." The courtroom erupted. Linda's face drained of color. She gripped the rail of the witness stand, her knuckles white. "You liar!" she screamed. "You signed it willingly. You told me it was for us." "Order!" Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Mrs. Chen, you will remain silent or I will hold you in contempt." But Linda was beyond control. She turned to me, her eyes wild, her mask shattered. "You think you've won? You think you know everything? You don't know the half of it, you ungrateful little—" "That's enough." The judge's voice cut through. "Bailiff, remove Mrs. Chen from the courtroom until she can compose herself." Linda was escorted out, still shouting. I watched her go, my heart pounding. My father slumped in his seat, his head in his hands. I wanted to feel triumph, but all I felt was a hollow ache. The judge called a recess. My lawyer leaned close. "That was good, but we need more. The trust fund documents are solid, but if she can prove he signed voluntarily, we're in trouble." I nodded. I reached into my evidence box and pulled out the last folder, the one I had kept hidden for this exact moment. Inside was a USB drive and a printed transcript of a conversation I had recorded 6 months ago, when Linda had called me late one night, drunk, after a fight with my father. I had played it 100 times. Every word was burned into my memory. I handed it to my lawyer. "This should end it." He read the transcript, his eyes widening. "Where did you get this?" "She gave it to me. She didn't know she was being recorded." He looked at me with a new respect. "You've been planning this for a long time. Longer than she knows." The bailiff called the court back to order. Linda returned, her face a mask of controlled fury. She took the stand again, her eyes fixed on me. My lawyer stood. "Mrs. Chen, I'd like to play a recording for the court." Linda's face went white. "You can't. That's illegal." It was recorded in a state with one-party consent, and you were the one speaking. The judge nodded. Proceed. The recording played. Linda's voice filled the room, slurred with alcohol, venomous with rage. That girl thinks she's entitled to everything. I made sure she got nothing. I made Richard sign over the house. I hid the trust fund. I told him if he ever told her, I'd destroy him, and I will. I have proof of his affairs. I have everything. The courtroom was silent. My father was crying. Linda sat frozen, her hands gripping the rail, her face a mask of horror. When the recording ended, the judge looked at Linda. "Mrs. Chen, do you have anything to say?" Linda's voice was barely a whisper. "I want my lawyer." The judge nodded. "This court will reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments. Until then, I advise both parties to consider settlement." I walked out of the courtroom. The sun was high now, bright and unforgiving. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but you don't know what I have on your father. Meet me at the coffee shop on Elm Street, alone, tonight, 8 p.m. Come alone, or I will ruin him." I stared at the screen. The game was not over. Linda was still fighting, and I had to decide how far I was willing to go to finish it. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. I could feel it pressing against my eardrums, a heavy weight that made every breath feel shallow. Judge Morrison had just called for a 15-minute recess, but nobody moved. Everyone was staring at the screen where the evidence had been displayed. My mother's face was frozen in a mask of disbelief. My father looked like he'd been punched in the gut. And Aunt Sarah? She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. I stayed seated, my hands trembling in my lap. The document on the screen was still visible. It was a signed agreement between my father and Aunt Sarah, dated 3 years ago. It stated in clear legal terms that they had agreed to split the proceeds of the family business sale 50-50. But there was a catch. The document also included a clause that said the agreement was void if either party failed to disclose any material financial advantage within 30 days of signing. I had found it buried in a box of old files at my parents' house, hidden behind a stack of tax returns. It had taken me weeks to piece together the timeline. My father had signed the agreement, then promptly failed to tell Aunt Sarah that he had already received a secret buyout offer from a competitor. He had waited until the 30-day window expired, then claimed the agreement was void because she hadn't disclosed anything. But she had nothing to disclose. She didn't know about the buyout. Now the truth was out, and I could see the rage building in Aunt Sarah's eyes. She was a proud woman, always careful to maintain her composure. But this was too much. The betrayal was too deep. "This is a lie," my father said, his voice cracking. He stood up, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "That document is forged. I never signed that." Judge Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Chen, sit down, or I will hold you in contempt." My father sat, but his face was red, his jaw clenched. He looked at my mother, who was staring at him with a mixture of horror and confusion. She had believed him. All these years she had believed that Aunt Sarah was the greedy one, the one who had stolen from the family. Now she was learning the truth in the worst possible way. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my lawyer, Mr. Harrison. He leaned in close, his voice barely a whisper. "You did well, Sarah. But this isn't over. He's going to fight back." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the day I had found the document. It was a rainy afternoon, and I had been cleaning out the attic. I had almost thrown the box away, but something made me open it. Something made me dig through the yellowed papers and faded receipts. And there it was, folded neatly at the bottom, a single sheet of paper, signed and dated, the proof of my father's betrayal. The recess ended, and the courtroom settled back into its tense rhythm. The judge called for the next witness. It was my mother. She walked to the stand slowly, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She looked older than I remembered, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes hollow. She had been crying. "Mrs. Chen," the judge said, "you are under oath. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered. Mr. Harrison approached her, his tone gentle. "Mrs. Chen, do you recognize this document?" He pointed to the screen. My mother's eyes flickered to it, then away. She nodded. "Please speak for the record," the judge said. "Yes," she said, her voice barely audible. "I recognize it." "And can you tell us when you first saw it?" She hesitated. I could see the war raging inside her. She wanted to protect my father. She had spent her whole life protecting him. But the truth was too big now. It was crushing her. "I saw it 3 years ago," she said finally. "My husband showed it to me. He said it was a mistake. He said he would fix it." A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. My father's face went pale. He had told her. He had told her about the agreement, and she had kept the secret. "And did he fix it?" Mr. Harrison asked. My mother shook her head. "No, he said it didn't matter. He said Sarah didn't deserve the money." The words hung in the air like poison. I could feel the anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. She had known. She had known all along. And she had said nothing. She had let me believe that I was the one who was wrong. She had let me carry the guilt and the shame. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen," Mr. Harrison said. "No further questions." The judge looked at my father's lawyer. "Your witness." But my father's lawyer just shook his head. He knew it was over. The evidence was too strong. The testimony was too damning. There was nothing left to argue. The judge called for a final recess before the verdict. I sat in the hallway, my head in my hands. Aunt Sarah came and sat beside me. She didn't say anything. She just put her hand on mine, and we sat there in silence, waiting. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge's face was grim. He looked at my father, then at Aunt Sarah, then at me. "This court has reviewed the evidence presented," he said. "It is clear that Mr. Chen engaged in fraudulent concealment of material financial information. The agreement with his sister is therefore valid and enforceable." My father's head dropped. My mother let out a sob. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the court finds that Mr. Chen's actions were deliberate and malicious. I am ordering that the full proceeds of the business sale be divided equally between the two siblings, with interest. And I am also awarding damages to Ms. Chen for emotional distress." Aunt Sarah squeezed my hand. I could feel the tears streaming down my face. It was over. The fight was over. But as we walked out of the courtroom, I saw my father's face. He was looking at me, and there was something in his eyes that I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shame. It was fear. He knew that this was just the beginning. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The family was broken, and I was the one who had broken it. I didn't know if I could ever fix it. I didn't know if I even wanted to. All I knew was that I had done what I had to do, and now I had to live with the consequences. The morning light felt different, harsher, more revealing. I stood in my childhood bedroom, running my fingers over the faded wallpaper, trying to ground myself in something real. The house was quiet now. Mom had left for work hours ago, probably grateful for an excuse to escape the tension that had settled over us like a fog. My phone buzzed, then again, then a third time. I didn't need to look. I knew it was Sarah. She'd been texting nonstop since the family meeting 2 days ago. Apologies, explanations, pleas for understanding. I'd read exactly none of them, but this time I picked up the phone. "Please just let me explain," the message read. "I know I messed up, but there's more you need to know." I typed back 3 words. "Coffee shop, 1 hour." She agreed immediately, probably relieved I was finally willing to talk. I wasn't sure why I'd agreed. Maybe because I needed answers. Maybe because the silence was eating me alive. I arrived early, ordered a black coffee I didn't touch, watched the door like a hawk. When Sarah walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her usual perfect posture was gone, shoulders hunched, eyes puffy. She wasn't wearing makeup. That alone told me how desperate she was. She sat down across from me without saying a word. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, 2 sisters separated by more than a table. "I know you hate me," she finally said. "I don't hate you, Sarah. I don't even know who you are anymore." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I deserve that." "Yeah, you do." She took a shaky breath. The money wasn't for me, not really, it was for Marcus. I felt my jaw tighten. Your boyfriend? The one who drives a Porsche? His business was failing. He told me if he didn't get a cash infusion fast, he'd lose everything. The house, the cars, his reputation. So you stole from our family to save his? It wasn't supposed to be stealing. Her voice cracked. Marcus said he'd pay it back within 6 months. He had an investor lined up. Everything was supposed to work out. But it didn't. She shook her head. The investor backed out. Marcus panicked. He started pressuring me to take more, said we needed to cover the gap until he could find another solution. I stared at her. He pressured you? You don't understand what he's like. She wiped at her eyes. When he gets scared, he gets mean. He told me if I didn't help him, he'd leave, and I'd be left with nothing. So you kept stealing. For months. Every time I tried to stop, he'd threaten me. He said he'd tell Mom and Dad everything, make it look like I'd done it alone. I wanted to feel sorry for her. I really did. But the anger was too fresh. You could have come to me, to anyone. And said what? That I'd been stupid enough to trust a man who saw me as an ATM? She laughed bitterly. You would have told me I was an idiot, and you'd have been right. The waitress came by. Neither of us ordered anything. There's something else, Sarah said quietly. Something I should have told you years ago. I waited. Remember when you got suspended in high school for cheating on that history exam? The memory hit me like a punch. I'd spent weeks protesting my innocence. The teacher had found my answers in someone else's handwriting. No one believed me. That was me, Sarah whispered. I was failing the class. Mom said if I didn't get my grades up, she'd cancel my trip to Europe that summer, so I copied your test answers, used your handwriting style. When they caught me, I panicked and said you'd given them to me. I couldn't breathe. You let me take the fall. I was 15. I was scared. You let me get suspended. You let me lose my scholarship eligibility. You let everyone think I was a cheater. She was crying now. I know. I've carried that guilt for a decade. Every time I looked at you, I remembered what I did. And you never said anything. I was too ashamed. I pushed my chair back, stood up. I need to go. Please, just let me finish. No, Sarah. I think you've taken enough from me. I walked out of the coffee shop and didn't look back. My hands were shaking. My vision was blurry. I made it to my car before the tears came. The betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about everything. Every secret she'd kept. Every lie she'd told. Every time she'd let me carry blame that belonged to her. I drove home in a daze. When I walked in, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of her. Where have you been? She asked. Talking to Sarah. Her face hardened. I don't want you seeing her, not after what she did. Mom, there's something you need to know. I told her about the high school incident, about the suspension, about the trip to Europe she'd never known about. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. I failed you, she finally said. Both of you. I was so busy working, so busy trying to keep everything together that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. It's not your fault. It is. I created an environment where Sarah felt she couldn't come to me, where you felt you had to carry your burdens alone. She reached for my hand. I'm going to make this right. All of it. What do you mean? She picked up one of the papers. It was a legal document. I've been talking to a lawyer about pressing charges against Sarah and about updating my will. The words hung in the air between us. Mom, she's your daughter. She's also a thief and a liar, and she hurt you in ways I can never forgive. Her voice was steel. I'm done protecting her. It's time for consequences. I looked at the document, at the legal language I barely understood, at the signature line waiting for my mother's name. Everything was about to change, and I had no idea if I was ready for what came next. The courtroom was silent, not the kind of silence that feels peaceful, but the kind that presses down on your chest until you can't breathe. I stood at the plaintiff's table, my hands flat on the wood, my knuckles white. Across the aisle, my parents sat rigid. My mother's eyes were fixed on the floor. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, his face a mask of stone. They looked smaller than I remembered. diminished, but I knew better than to mistake that for weakness. Judge Morrison adjusted her glasses and peered at me over the rim. "Ms. Chen, you have the floor for your closing statement." I took a breath. The air tasted like recycled justice and old carpet. I turned to face the jury, 12 strangers who had spent the last week sifting through the wreckage of my family. They'd seen the bank statements, the trust documents, the emails where my father referred to me as the liability. They'd watched the video of my mother laughing at my wedding, then signing papers to drain my college fund the same week. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I'm not here to punish my parents. I'm here to tell the truth." I walked slowly along the jury box. For 26 years, I believed I was the problem. I believed I wasn't smart enough, good enough, or grateful enough. I believed the bruises were my fault. I believed the silence was my punishment. I believed I deserved to be forgotten. I stopped at the center. But the evidence shows something different. The evidence shows that my parents made a choice. Every single day, they chose to hide my sister's trust fund. They chose to pay for her private school, her car, her apartment. They chose to let me believe I was a burden while they stockpiled wealth for her. My father shifted in his seat. His lawyer whispered something in his ear. My father shook his head. I saw his hand grip the armrest, the same hand that had slapped me across the face when I was 12 for asking why my sister got a new bike and I got a used one with rust on the chain. "The law says that parents have a duty to provide for their children equally," I continued. "But my parents didn't just fail that duty. They weaponized it. They used my poverty to control me. They used my desperation to keep me quiet. They used my love for them as a leash." I looked at my mother. She finally lifted her eyes. They were wet, but I didn't see remorse. I saw fear. Fear of losing. Fear of being exposed. Fear of the daughter she had trained to be invisible suddenly standing in the light. "I'm not asking for vengeance," I said softly. "I'm asking for recognition. I'm asking for justice. I'm asking you to see what I saw, to hear what I heard, to believe what I lived." The jury foreman, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a tired face, nodded almost imperceptibly. I felt a crack in my chest, a small one, just enough to let the hope in. "The trust fund my parents set up for my sister was worth $400,000, I said. "I received nothing, not a penny, not a birthday card, not a phone call when I was hospitalized for pneumonia at 19 because I couldn't afford health insurance." I turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I'm asking the court to order my parents to pay restitution, not for revenge, but for survival. For the years I spent working 3 jobs while my sister traveled to Europe. For the nights I slept in my car because I couldn't afford rent. For the child who believed she was worthless because the people who were supposed to love her made sure she felt that way." My father stood up. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice sharp. "We gave you everything you needed." "No," I said, my voice rising. "You gave me nothing, and you made sure I knew I wasn't worth anything." The bailiff stepped forward. My father sat down, but his eyes burned. Judge Morrison looked at the jury. "You may begin deliberations." I watched them file out. The door clicked shut. The silence returned. My mother was crying now, quietly, without sound. My father stared at the table. I sat down. My hands were shaking. I had said everything. I had shown everything. Now it was out of my hands. My lawyer touched my arm. "You did well." I nodded, but I didn't feel well. I felt hollow, like I had poured every drop of myself into that room and had nothing left. An hour passed, then 2. The jury came back. Their faces were unreadable. The foreman stood. "We have reached a verdict." Judge Morrison unfolded the paper. She read it silently. Then she looked at me. Her expression softened, just slightly. "In the case of Chen versus Chen, the jury finds in favor of the plaintiff." The air left my lungs. My lawyer squeezed my shoulder. I heard my mother gasp. My father said nothing. "The court orders the defendants to pay restitution in the amount of $400,000, plus legal fees, to be distributed from the estate and personal assets of the defendants." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I had won. I had actually won. I looked at my parents. My mother was sobbing now, her face buried in her hands. My father sat frozen, his face pale, his hands limp on the table. He wouldn't look at me. I wanted to feel triumph. I wanted to feel relief. But all I felt was grief. Grief for the family I never had, for the love that was never real. I stood up. I walked toward the door. I didn't look back. Outside, the sun was setting. The sky was orange and pink and gold. I stood on the courthouse steps and let the warmth hit my face. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but you don't know what you've started. Sarah. I stared at the screen. My sister. The sister who had inherited everything. The sister who had never once reached out to me. I didn't respond. I just watched the sun sink lower. The battle was over, but the war had just begun.